It's August 26th, 2021. This is Roqe. Hi there, welcome to episode 139 of Roqe. Hope you're keeping well wherever you are tuning in from around the world. Durud. Salam doustan aziz. Umeedwar hastam ke khub va mizun bashin. Hello to you from Toronto, Canada. Welcome to another one of our special themed episodes of Roqe this month. Hello, Groovy Shaya.
Hi, Azizam. Hi.
This is the last of our themed episodes before we get back to a new season 2 of Roqe next Monday, so be ready for that. Today we have something special though. We are focusing on the music icons, two remarkable humans of Iranian descent, both of them legendary creators who've made and are making a huge contribution in the realm of Persian music, songwriting, and performance. First up, simply one of the greatest singer-songwriters in Persian history, and a man whose songs can be sung by Iranians around the world. Faramarz Aslani joins me for his first major English interview ever, and then a songwriter that has few equals, a man who has literally been responsible for hundreds of Iranian hit songs over the last 5 decades, from Gugush to Daryush to Ebi to Mo'in. Farid Zoland joins me from Los Angeles. And a special note that both of these interviews will be presented with subtitles in Persian and in English on YouTube and Instagram. That's all coming up. We're coming to you on roqemedia.com. It is there that you can link to all of our platforms and where you can become a patron. We are on our ongoing mission to build a new audiovisual encyclopedia of Iranian diaspora identity. We're coming to you on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and CastBox. And if you like to see some visuals with Roqe and those subtitles, see us on social media. Switch over to YouTube or Instagram right now. And if you like your Roqe descriptions and bulletins in English and in Farsi, check us out on Telegram. All right, let's get to our guests. We get back to our regular show on Monday, August 30th. But in the meantime, this is a special themed episode of Roqe. I'm Jian Ghomeshi. This is the Music Icons. Here we go. You know, it's no exaggeration to say that my first featured guest today is a legend when it comes to contemporary Iranian music. He is an icon, beloved and respected Iranian-American composer, songwriter, instrumentalist. He is the man with that satin voice. Take a listen to this.
Faramarz Aslani یکی از من میتونم بگم یکی از پدیده‌های جدید هستش در موسیقی ما. شعر میگه، خودش آهنگ میسازه، خودش میزنه، خودش میخونه، بعضی وقتا خودشم گوش میکنه.
چون به یاد تو میافتم دیدم از اشک تر میشه سفر کردم که یابم بلکه یارم را نجستم یار و گم کردم یارم را نجستم یار و گم کردم یارم را شام تارم کو جلوه بهارم کو دیر و پش نزارم کو همه کسم تو هر هوسم تو هم نفسم تو بال و پرم تو هم سفرم تو بیش و بسم تو.
There you go, a little taste of some of the familiar hits of my featured guest today, the singular Faramarz Aslani. Songs you just heard spanning over 4 decades of creative magic. Faramarz was born in Tehran in the mid-1950s. After moving to England for university and graduating from London University's College of Journalism in the early 70s, he returned to Iran and worked for one of two English dailies, Tehran Journal. But, of course, it was his breakthrough as a musician that made him a public name. In 1977, Faramarz Aslani signed with CBS Records and released his debut album, Del Mashghulia, or Occupation of the Heart. It was an instant classic that has endured to this day. The song Ageh Yeh Rooz, If One Day, from the album became one of the greatest Iranian music hits and has remained on the bestsellers chart since its debut. After the 1979 revolution in Iran, Faramarz and his family moved back to England, where he worked both as a journalist and a musician for more than a decade. Then, after a very successful U.S. tour in the early 1990s, which attracted the attention of eager Iranians all over America, Faramarz moved to the States, where he lives and works today. Throughout over 44 years of his music career, Faramarz has released 6 studio albums, several hit singles, some celebrated videos and poetic works, and a number of legendary collaborations with everyone from Dariush to, very recently, young Danny Asadi. Faramarz has been releasing an autobiographical video series called Droplets, and this past year put out a new single called Hanuz. We will get to all of that. But first, Faramarz Aslani joins me from Los Angeles today. Hello, sir.
Hello, Jian. Hello, and hello to all the wonderful people who are watching and hearing us today.
It is such an honor to do this and to do it in English. You know, upon telling some people that we'll be doing this interview, I had the question, how is Faramarz's English? Which is quite funny because not only is your English perfect, but you were a journalist in England for many years when you left Iran after the revolution. Does it amuse you that people do not know that side of you?
There are a lot of sides of me that people don't know, but little by little, I'm going to divulge the other sides and facets of mine.
Before we leave the idea of you being a journalist, I'm curious where you feel the journalist in you intersects with the songwriter and artist. Much of your music, if one were to generalize, would generalize to say it's romantic, it's poetic, rather than political or, say, based in the news of the day. Do you feel like those are two different sides of you, or do you feel like the journalist in your DNA informs you as an artist somehow?
To be honest with you, one of the first lessons of journalism is observation. You have to observe, and as a musician, I also observe because I write all my own lyrics and all my own music. If I have sang from other people, has been from Maulana, has been from Hafiz, Sepehri, or other contemporary and classical poets. But usually I sing my own lyrics because my reason is that I know myself better than anyone else. I can express myself through my words. But if I sing from another person, I cannot, really and truly relay his message. I don't have that in me. I have to feel it first and foremost.
یه دیواره یه دیواره یه دیواره یه دیواره که پشتش هیچی نداره تو که دیوارو پوشیدن سیاه ابرون نمیاد دیگه خورشید از توشون بیرون.
So it's funny because, to begin with, when I went to England, my father wanted me, to study law as he had. But I found that very cumbersome, especially, when they put the British Constitution in front of me, which was a hefty book. Believe me, I couldn't carry it. Even as a young man, I couldn't carry that book. And after a while, I thought, this is not what I want. I gave it a respite for about a year or so, and then I went to College of Journalism, and fortunately I was accepted there, and I started journalism because it worked with words.
Yes.
And I have always been a lover of words. Yes. I mean, to me are magic, and that's why way of expression for me.
And by the way, not just words, but language. It feels like so much of your life and works are intertwined with language in the formal Farsi that you famously speak, in your perfect English that we can hear right now, in the fact that you studied French as a little kid. Is it safe to assume you love language?
Very early in life, I found, that I have a knack for languages, so to me, it was very easy to learn different languages. And of course, I went to a French primary school for 6 years. Even before I went to primary school, my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, taught me the Latin alphabet, and he really spent time with me. So when I went to St. Louis School, in Tehran, I was quite ahead of the other kids, who were there. And since then, I've always loved language. I love to find the roots and the rudiments of the language.
I want to work through your story and with the music that at each sort of point in the story, at each goalpost as we go through your decades. But let me just ask you this first. When we played that little medley up the top, when you sit and hear snippets of your hits, your past songs, are you someone who delights in hearing them, or do you think of things you would have done differently and you just want to focus forward?
To me, because the lyrics are mine, and it was a final decision to put down those lyrics and sing those lyrics. Lyrics-wise, no, but music-wise, yes.
به بالهایتون نشسته آیا هنوز هم میگذرید ز شهری که زمونه به رویم دراشو بسته.
Through years, for instance, my first album, Occupation of the Heart, there are some songs in it which I want to do with different arrangements now. Because then the lyrics acquired that kind of arrangement. Nowadays, my metabolism changed and I want to hear it differently.
But that's so interesting that you stand by the lyrics. The 27-year-old Faramarz writing that album, you're fine with all the lyrics. They are, as you should be. They're a snapshot in time, but that you don't put on the critical lens about your writing in that sense.
When I started writing my own lyrics, I had an idea. I knew poetry very well. Poetry to me is second nature. It's like my, it's my nature, to write poetry and, to speak poetry. And it's very easy for me to write lyrics and write poems. When I started writing my own lyrics, I had all kind of complicated poetry in my head, but I wanted to start with the simplest lyrics you could imagine. Mm-hmm. Because I said, if I go with the very heavy lyrics that I have, nobody, will understand it to begin with. And I probably, alienate myself to my listener. So I used very simple lyrics, which is Ageh Yeh Rooz, very simple lyrics. It's almost the way you speak in the street. And then I knew much, much deeper and much more sophisticated language for poetry. But I said, no, this is not right. I want to be with my audience, with my listeners. So let me start simple and then carry them with me to heavier lyrics and heavier poetry. And that's what happened.
I should make this distinction, I think, for non-Iranians watching or listening to this as well, which is that when we talk about you, we're talking about someone, as you've pointed out a couple of times now already in this interview, that is very much involved in every aspect of the creation of your pieces. And that wasn't really a tradition amongst many of your contemporaries. It still isn't. And your lyrics are very special, and they are written by you. When I talk about you to my Canadian friends who may not know of you yet, I say you're like our Iranian Leonard Cohen. Nobody wrote the lyrics for Leonard Cohen. That is who he is his lyrics and his music. But the fact that you were bold enough to take the step to do that really kind of sets you apart. How did you know that was okay, or what was your influence to be able to do that in the 70s when many other famous singers, great ones, had lyricists who would write things for them?
Yeah. It's funny you should mention that, because when I got to England, one of the very first songs, that I heard was Leonard Cohen's, first album, the songs of Leonard Cohen with Suzanne, an old, I think, Bird on the Wire. And before I listened to Cohen, I knew him through his poetry. I had read his book of poetries. And he had appealed to me because, I said, how, musical his words are. I didn't know he sang or he was a musician as well. And then in England, I realized that, the man is an all-rounder, he writes his own lyrics, his own music. That's what I wanted to do, a package of myself, of my soul, to, say, well, this is what I have, take it or leave it, the need is mine. I always say the need to write and sing and perform is mine. I need to do that. If you tape the beak of a bird, probably dies if you cannot sing. That's like me. If I don't write, if I don't sing, perhaps, I finished.
میدونی دل اسیر تا بمیره میدونی بدون تو دلم آروم نگیره میدونی دلتنگ تو نموده آهنگ تو ولی بیهوده جوید بسی بیهوده پوید.
It is such an interesting journey. I always say, I am in the middle here. The source is somewhere else, which is the inspiration and the inspirational. You catch that source and then you carry it and you deliver it to your listener, to your audience. I am in the middle. I like a wire. I am like a wire. The source is somewhere else and the receiver in other places. So I'm the connection in between the two.
In the beginning, back in that late 70s period, did anyone say to you, did someone at CBS Records or one of your friends or a producer or something say to you, listen, buddy, actually, we should get Iraj Jaratiatai to write the lyrics for you?
Oh, yes. I'm so glad you mentioned that. Because first of all, they had the problem with the arrangements of my music. When I got to Iran, Khanum Farid Zoland, which is an opera singer, I was invited to her place one night, and many big musicians were there, and I had written a couple of songs, so I performed them. And at the end of the evening, this gentleman came to me, a tall gentleman, very, very nice face, and said, well, my name is this and that. I have come to establish CBS Records in Tehran. And we want to have Tehran as the center of all our Middle Eastern activities, production and all these kind of things. Can you come and see me tomorrow? I went to his office in the morning and he said to me, the songs that you sang last night, who were they by? I said, well, they are my own songs. He said, how many of them do you have? Then I had about 21, 22 songs, which 10 of which, went into the first album, Del Mashghuliha. I said, 2021, I said, okay, I'm going to send a producer to come and work with you and select some of the songs. Mr. Marcel Estefanian, who was a very fantastic pianist and musical director. he came to my house as a producer of my work, and we selected 10 songs. We chose 10 songs between all the songs that I had, and he said, these 10 songs are good, we can go with them. So I went to Studio Pop in Tehran with one guitar, and we recorded all these 10 songs. And CBS wanted to give it a huge arrangement. I said, no, I want a couple of guitars, percussions, perhaps a flute here or there, and bass, of course. They said, no, this is not the fashion. People are not used to that. People would love to hear huge orchestrations. I said, no, well, my words will get lost. So I won that battle. I'm so glad I did, because, otherwise it would have been dated so badly, the songs.
It really stands out. It was you took the words. I'm so glad you went there, because it was something I wanted to ask you about. The production blows me away. I mean, and I think you're right that part of the reason it's a classic record is because it's an overused word to say timeless. Vali, it doesn't sound like that moment of the late 1970s with the disco or the production or the horns or whatever. And so it really is a surprising listen to how stripped down it is. Let me just play a little bit of, it's inevitable that we have to play a tiny bit of it. Let's play a bit of Ageh Yeh Rooz, just to hear that, what you were just talking about.
اگه میخوای پیشم بمونی بیا تا باقی جوونی بیا تا پوست به استخونه نزار دلم تنها بمونه بزار شبم رنگی بگیره دوباره آهنگی بگیره رنگ اون دیاری که توش منو تنها نزاری اگه یه روزی نوم تو گوش من صدا کنه دوباره باز غمت بیاد که منو مبتلا کنه به دل میگم کاریش نباشه بذار درد تو دواشه بره توی تموم جونم که باز برات آواز بخونم.
So a little bit of that legendary song from Faramarz Aslani's debut album, Occupation of the Heart and Ageh Yeh Rooz. Faramarz, when you were recording that, when you guys were doing that, did you have any idea how special that song was, that it would effectively become the anthem, for Iranians for decades to come?
I didn't, to be honest with you, because I was so excited to go into the studio, and have CBS, Columbia, record my work, which I was, on the top of the world, to be honest with you. I didn't think about the success of it. I didn't think about anything else. Only that my music was recorded by CBS, and it's going to be that, logo of CBS in the corner of my, album. That was very exciting for me. I never thought, it gets so huge, that it's been sung in so many different languages, professionally and otherwise. But Jian, let me go to when you asked me about lyrics.
Yes.
I haven't forgotten you asked me, whether there was pressure that I should use other lyrics. Yes, there was. But my reasoning was that I want to express myself. I want to have a package of my own self. I cannot represent somebody else's thoughts. I can do that, if I read their poetry aloud, but to sing and, to write music on, is a different animal, which I rather use my own lyrics. And mind you, the big names that you mentioned, one of them said to me, well, your lyrics are so pisha pa uftade, so ordinary, so, passé and all these kind of things, they're cheap, you should write, more sophisticated lyrics, And I said, well, I cannot, to begin with, shock my audience into good words. I want them to come with me step by step, and grow with me. You know, I mean, yes, that there was a pressure in that sense as well.
I mean, again, the amazing thing is that because even when that record came out at first, I'm sure, I have to imagine there were people going, what's going on here? There's no big production on this. You know, what does this guy think he's doing? You know,
first of all, the directors of CBS, you know, I mean, Mr. Weinberg, you know, had a feat. Yeah, you know, yeah, they said, you know, well, this is not usual. You know, what we hear is different now, and I proved them wrong. But my instinct proved them wrong. You know, it wasn't a decision that I made. My instinct told me otherwise, and I said to myself, I'm not expecting anything from this. Let me at least be honest with my own instinct.
I think I have my answer based on the enthusiasm you're showing now, but just to ask the question, I mean, what is your relationship with Ageh Yeh Rooz at this point? When, you know, you're doing an interview in 2021 and somebody's asking you about that song. Does it get to a point where you just go, "Digeh bas, enough already. I'm tired of talking about this song"?
Never.
You don't.
I swear to God, never. Every time I sing it, it is like the first time.
But you know, a lot of artists, and I'm sure you understand, want to say, "Hey, man, listen to my most recent work. I've done a lot of stuff since then." It feels gracious of you to allow us to still exploit that song when we talk about you. But I mean, we can't avoid it because it's an anthem, right?
Well, if it wasn't good, I shouldn't have put it out, you know. So, but if I released it, that meant, you know, that I believed in it then, and I'm so happy, you know, that it was accepted the way it was, and it was received the way it was.
Do you get the publishing royalties on it, Faramarz, or is this another one of those things where it's
yes, no, I have it. There are complications, you know, but. Since, you know, I am the author, you know, of the works, you know,
That's great.
have the publishing rights.
That's great. You know, I was going to say, I mean, the thing about you being this songwriter, this iconic songwriter, is that it's all on you then. You can only put out stuff when you're able to write, when it's coming to you. And, you know, I mean, it's not a surprise to you that people have said to you, you're an iconic songwriter. You're not entirely a prolific one. You've put out 6 studio albums in 4 decades. And when you've been asked about that, you say, I cannot force my writing. I have to wait for the songs to come to me. Tell me what it feels like for a song to come to you.
It is very easy for me to write lyrics. You know, in one of my concerts at UCLA many years ago, I picked 4 people from 4 different rows of the audience, and each one of them I asked for a word. They each gave me a word. Right there and then, I wrote a poem and I sang it for them, and I put music on it and I sang it. It's that easy for me to write lyrics and to write poetry. But the thing that travels through me is a different story altogether. It's got nothing to do with the technique of writing.
Okay.
It has something to do, it's all feelings. It's all encompassing and in enveloping me in a different sort of atmosphere, and I don't know what happens, to be honest with you.
اگر روزی نگاه تو مونس چشمان من باشد قلعه سنگین تنهایی 4 دیوارش ز هم پاشد.
Most of my lyrics, I do not even پاکنویس میکنم. I don't even rewrite them.
Wow.
I write from the beginning to the end. Perhaps, you know, here or there I change a couple of words, but nothing major. Because then it is not I who is writing, it is something that is traveling through me. It is something that behests that I should write the lyrics down like that.
So does that mean that you can't say, tomorrow from 2 to 6 p.m. I'm going to sit and write.
No.
That would be useless. You have to wait until it comes to you?
Yes, that is why, it takes me such a long time, to put out, albums, because I find it dishonest to myself, first of all, to do otherwise. Otherwise, I can, right now it's so easy to have albums, you can have it very fast, right, with the facilities that we have at our disposals right now. But I do not feel it. I do not, I always say it is better to work less than work worse. Kamkari behtar az badkariye. The other, where was it? About 3 or 4 years ago, Marjan, my wife, came and said, let me look at your voice memos. In my voice memos, she found 19 songs, which I made an album of, and so many other songs were in there. And I had just, recorded it scratch, and I had left it there. And I had done nothing to them. And she said to me, are you crazy? These are all hits. These are beautiful songs. And of course, it was To, Yar, Waqti Rafti, all these songs were in that list.
Well, thank God that she forced you. I'm going to come back to your most recent records. Sure. First, take me back, because you mentioned a couple things that I must circle back to. Can you briefly tell us about those early days in Tehran?
From the moment I opened my eyes, I saw poets, musicians, and interesting characters in our house. My father and mother, loved to have people around, and I had many friends. My father, played tar and sitar, on the side. He always said, this is okay to have it on the side. And that's why, he was against me becoming a musician. Said, you can have it as a hobby, not seriously. So he dabbled in playing the tar and everything. My mother had a beautiful voice, singing voice, wonderful singing voice. My mother's voice was my beginning of finding that you can express yourself through singing. And if you're happy, if you're sad, there's a way of expression. And many poets, came to our house. So it was inevitable that I should, be interested in music and lyrics, especially through my grandfather and seeing the poets in our house. And I've always said, perhaps this is repetitious, but I said, if there were mathematicians coming to our house, perhaps, I was a great mathematician now. I'm not a musician. But, fortunately for me, musicians and poets came to our house.
آدم که یاد گذشته هاش میفته چشمونش از گریه اشکالود میشه تصویری از روزهای رفته میبینه که در اون هر چهره‌ای نابود میشه هر پرستویی که به سوی میپره خبر پایون فصلی رو میبره هر گل تازه‌ای که چشم باز میکنه به خودم میگم که این نیز میگذره.
When you talk about those early years in Tehran, the way you talk about it is quite romantic. And it's also clear that you are a romantic, I think. Tell me about Faribande. Can I ask you about her?
Oh, yes. Faribande was 8. I was 6. And she was a neighbor's girl. And I fell in love with her because she always smelled of Nivea and Blendex cream, that she wore on her face and her hands. And I always associate the smell of those two creams with Faribande. Faribande comes to mind. And I fell in love with her, and it was true love. I mean, to me, that was
an older
love.
Woman. You were 6.
Oh, yeah, exactly. She was 2 years my senior. But unfortunately, they departed, and that emptiness stayed. with me because, I really missed her, because I said in one of the droplets, the droplets of my life, that in order to throw snowballs at her, I had prepared some snowballs, but, she wasn't there anymore. And the snowballs melted in the corner of the garden without her. And it was very touching, the feelings I had for her.
It's beautiful, the story you tell in Droplets in your autobiographical video series. That's where I got it from. That's why I wanted to ask her about her. Do we know what happened to Faribande? I mean, if only she knew you were going to become a superstar, I'm sure you would have. She would have stuck with you. She would have stayed in the neighborhood.
I do not know what happened to Faribande. Faribande and her family left our neighborhood and they went to another place. And another young girl, perhaps the same age as I, moved into their house. And of course, I fell in love with that girl then because, it was convenient, it was a neighbor, And that girl, died of diphtheria.
Oh.
And that really left a big hole in my heart because I remember, I was so upset and I cried so much that my mother used to console me and, tell me that these things happen and poor thing is with the angels now. But that didn't mean anything to me with the angels. I didn't want her to be with the angels. I wanted her to be with me and not the angels. And that and the death of my pigeon, the two introductions to the end of
mortality. Yes.
Yeah, introduce mortality to me. Yeah.
By the way, it sounds like your love is based on geography. Whoever's living next door to you, you fall in love with.
Unless they are not pleasing to the eye.
You things seem to be really falling into place for you. You have this, as you've described it, these wonderful memories of Tehran. You end up after high school going to London to study as a journalism, and then you come back to Iran. And of course, this is the moment after working at Tehran Journal, etc., that you have that moment as a musician where you sign to CBS. That iconic, that classic first album comes out. You eke out a second album, Hafez, a Memorandum, in 1978. Before you are, Faramarz, effectively forced to leave Iran during the revolution or right before it. I haven't heard a lot in interviews that you've done about what that moment was like for you. This young guy who has just summited, who has just found his success, being forced to leave the country and effectively leave his career. Tell me what that was like.
Then we were right in the middle of so many things happening that I couldn't look at it that way. I knew that what I was doing yesterday, going to studio easily and, recording, was not going to happen anymore. I knew that, CBS was being, dismantled. The revolutionary personnel came and, took CBS over. And, and in the middle of everything, my wife was British. My children went to English school and the English school was closed.
Yeah.
And since my wife was British, I felt that for her safety, and that was one of the reasons, I left Iran. Perhaps, I wouldn't have left if I was not married or I was not married to a foreign national. And my children had no school and they were used to the school they went to. So we decided, to leave and go to England, which was my second home at that time. And there I realized the tragedy had hit, and I am not going to see the fruits of my labor as it was,
Yeah.
And everybody said to me, oh, it was so short-lived. And through that, I said, oh my God, they're right. It was short-lived. It was only 2 years after I recorded that we had to leave Iran.
نه تنها خورشید ما گرمی هاشو از دست میده آسمون فیروز رنگی هاشو حالا برچیده خدایا این مردم کوکی چی میگن دریغا این عاشق نمیشه.
It was such a chaotic time, to be honest with you. My mind was racing here and there. What are we going to do? We were limited in the amount of money we could take out. I had 2 kids, and what was I going to do? They wouldn't let us take more than $10,000 between all of us out of Iran. Mm-hmm. And what could you do with $10,000? You don't have a home, you don't have a car, you don't have clothes. I mean, it was, but life goes on. And
if I were to say, how do you characterize the 1980s for you? Would it just basically be what you just said, which is a very, very difficult time? He's sequestered in England. I mean, I'm no doubt doing some things that you loved, but the trajectory of how it all happened for you is really, of course, the denouement later on in life. Your success is there, but it must have been heartbreaking.
It was in a way, but I didn't have time to sit down and mope about it. I had to do something because of my kids and everything. So I did some translations. I worked with some publications as a journalist, as a freelancer, and also I did some cabaret singing at nights. With Aref. For many months or perhaps a year or two. We had a club together. I sang in that club, and it was very successful. Because every Iranian there, thought they were going back home, so they were willingly spending money, and nightclubs and everything. But things changed little by little, and I had to make a living, and we had to cope with it in a way.
By the 1990s, in 1999, in fact, you put out your 3rd record, and this is your first major studio record since the late 70s, since you were in Iran, called Days of Songs and Sorrow. Let me just play a little bit of the title track from that record.
روزهای بهانه و تشویش روزگار ترانه و اندوه روزهای بلند و بی فرجام از فغان نگفته ها هم بود روزگار سکوت و تنهایی پی هم انس خویشتن گشتن سال خوردن به کوچه های غریب تیغ افسوس بر آوردن.
A little taste of the song Days of Songs and Sorrow from the album of the same name that came out in 1998, the 3rd Faramarz Aslani record, and the first record that you made post-revolution. What do you remember about that time, making that record, and how it felt to be birthing a new album again?
I had written the songs many years prior to that, and it took me a while, to finish the album because I was in England and my mind was not right then, was not with it. I had some personal relationship problems, in England, and which fortunately was solved. So I was able to finish my record and finish the album. Recently, the album I did with Babak Amini, that all the arrangements of the 8 songs are Babak's, and I always wanted to have something as a memorandum of our work together and our travels and concerts together. So I'm very happy to see that album, Midnight Till Dawn, which is all arranged by Babak Jan,
yes.
And it's my music and my lyrics, and Chekke is in it, Storia di un amor is in it.
You stole my thunder. I'm coming to Czechia because it's actually one of my favorite songs by anyone ever, in fact. Let me play a bit of this because it is just gorgeous writing, and I want to remind people of the song, and then I want to ask you a little bit about where this song came from. Go ahead, Jian.
در شب تنهایی من عشق بود و شمع و شراب بوی تنت پیچیده بود در سرزمین رخت خاک تا سحرگه یاد تو بود مونس من در شب تار مرغ شب بر شاخه میخوان از شبانه خوب دیدار.
The song Çeker. I'm stepping on Babak's solo there right after. That's from 2017, Faramarz Aslani. It is such a gorgeous song. Tell me about that song.
I was sitting, with my pen and paper, and I was jotting something down. And I suddenly said to myself, you haven't written any songs recently. What has happened to you? As if there is no drop left in this jug anymore. Yek çekke nist dar in sabu. This was the beginning of it. And I said, wow, that sounds good. Yek çekke nist dar in sabu. Harfi bezan chizi begu. Say something, do something. And then this became the song, the urge to write a song became the song. That is how it happened. I had felt like a jug that had no water in it. I felt empty,
This has been a great pleasure. I'm very grateful to you.
Thank you so much, Jian. Thank you for inviting me. And I thank you very much for the line of questioning, which was quite refreshing.
Thank you. I hope to see you post-COVID back on tour so we can get you back here in Canada. And
absolutely. You might see me in Canada.
Do more of this in person. Kheli mutshakir. Merci.
Thank you, Jian. All the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That is the legendary Iranian-American singer, songwriter, instrumentalist Faramarz Aslani. Faramarz joined us from Los Angeles, California today. This is a special themed edition of Roqe, the music icons. We get back to our regular Roqe programs. The debut of season 2 this coming Monday. Join us for that. Remember, for all things Roqe, our episodes, our guests, our videos, our music, everything can be found at roqemedia.com. Let's get to our second feature guest. If you grew up in Iran or have been listening to Iranian popular music anytime in the last 50 years, you will know many of the songs my next guest has composed. In fact, it's a pretty sure bet that you will be able to sing back melodies that have emerged from his creative well. Take a listen to this.
سرخورده بودم از عشق در انتظار مردن
در به در همیشگی کلی 100 ساله منم خاک تمام جاده هاست جامعه کهنه تنم
موج سبز سبز تن صحرا تو بودی.
Little taste of some very familiar voices to those in Iran and in the Iranian diaspora. That was In Order, songs by Gugush, Dariush, Ebi, Haideh, and Mo'in. And those were all massive hit songs composed by our guest today. Farid Zoland is simply one of the most prolific and successful contemporary composers and songwriters of our time. A quick glance at his list of hits reveals a range of musical genres and styles so diverse it's difficult to believe the songs could have come from the same person. And he has just kept pumping them out year after year, from before the revolution to today in Los Angeles. As you just heard, he's written for the A-list of Persian music legends, and you can add to that list many, many others like Sattar, Marjan, and Shah Roqe, and emerging talents such as Rastin. Many of Farid's songs have become popular anthems in their own right. In fact, every song that we plan on playing throughout this interview is one that Farid Zoland has been the composer of. But while Farid's story should be a heartening one of tremendous talent and remarkable success, a kid born in Afghanistan who has become the composer of the sound of Iranian pop over the last half century, there is a difficult side to his legacy as well. Based on the lack of any kind of sophisticated publishing or copyright royalty system in Persian culture and music, Farid Zoland has barely been compensated in any meaningful material way for his creative catalog of work. Indeed, while his songs have transcended genre and generations and are featured on radio, at parties, live shows, and in many Iranian films, his remuneration has been modest. Today, anyone in his place in the West would be making millions on royalties alone, paid for repeated viewings or streams of his music. But Farid is now having to resort to legal action to secure some part of what is rightfully his. Right now, the legendary Farid Zoland joins me from Los Angeles today. Hello, sir.
Hello, how are you? Good to talk to you, and I'm happy to speak with you, and you had a very beautiful contradiction for me, and I appreciate that.
Oh, it is such an honor to have you on the program, Farid Jan. I am in awe of you and your talents and your output over the years. من میدونم که شما انگلیسی متوجه میشین ولی
متوجه میشم اون تا این لهجه‌مون درست نمیشه دیگه.
خب من سوالا رو توی انگلیسی میپرسم، شما میتونی فارسی جواب بدی یا انگلیسی. هرچی میخوای. I'll ask the questions in English and you can answer in English or Farsi, whatever's comfortable.
فارسی جواب میدم به شما بعد.
Okay. So there is so much we could talk about, and I feel like I could spend this interview just dissecting some of your masterful hit compositions, but I would really like to discuss this issue of copyright and compensation, because it is not something that just affects you, but many Persian artists and creators. Are you comfortable if we go right to the issue of compensation and copyright to start? I think it's essential.
من خوشحالم که شما این سوال مطرح میکنید، چون من برای این مسئله کوشش زیادی دارم از سال 2006 تا الان و ادامه داره. متاسفانه در موزیک ایران و بعض ممالک مدل ایست اینا رعایت نمیکنن مسئله کپی رایت رو، و در ایران که خب اصلا این رعایت نمیشد و همه چی به نام خواننده یا کمپانی یا اینا هر کدوم منتشر میکردن یه مقدار ناچیز پرداخت میکردن و مثل که یه پرتقال بخرن و میگرفتن این کار. نمیدونستن که موزیک چیزیست که از هر طرفش وقتی که پول ساخته میشه باید از به آتورش پرداخت بشه، و این پول فقط مسئله پول برای پولدار شدن ما نیست.
آره، فهمیدم.
برای این هستش که این موسیقی روز به روز پیشرفت بکنه، کارهای جدید انجام بدیم، خرچهای جدید بکنیم. اما وقتی خواننده آهنگای من و آهنگای همکارای دیگه منو که بعد 4 5 6 نفر هم بیشتر نمیشیم و ترانه‌سراهای دیگه که سال زحمت کشیدن میرن در یک استیج میخونن از $700,000 تا $140,000-$150,000 $120,000 پول در یک شب میگیرن و $1 به آتوراش نمیدن. حالا شما تجسم کنین که خواننده بسیار خوب عالی اینا میاد در استیج میاد میخونه این آهنگایی که ما براشون ساختیم اینو نخونن، خب مردم نمیان اونجا.
با شب من فقط تویی ستاره دنبال دور، با شب من فقط تویی.
مردم فقط برای ریخت و فقط صدای خواننده که چیزی رو نخونه یا لا بکنه که مردم نمیان و اینا این رایت ما رو قانونی نمیدونن و اصلا نمیخوان بدونن. من و همکارای دیگه من شاعرها و ترانه‌سرای مثل ایرج جنتی‌عطایی، اردلان سرفراز، شهریار قنبری و آقای حسن شماعی زاده و ما این مسئله این پروسه رو داریم جلو میبریم که این کرونا آمد این مقدار مسائل رو به تعویق انداخت. در 4-5 سال گذشته ما تمام این آهنگا رو به ثبت رساندیم و رجیستر کردیم اما این آهنگا رو که معلوم باشه که مسئله قانونی اینجوری که چون در اروپا، در آمریکا، در اینجا که شما میدونید که این مسئله بسیار براشون مهمه و اینا. ما وقتی که یک آمریکایی، یک موزیسین آمریکایی رو باش میشینم صحبت میکنم میگه شما چند تا آهنگ ساختین؟ مثلا من میگم 240 تایی. او حیرت زده میمونه.
It's unbelievable.
میگه چرا؟ میگم چقدر؟ میگم 170-80 تا من هیت دارم فقط. اینا یک دونه دوتایشو داشته باشن زندگیشون از این رو به اون رو میشه.
That is, yes, I was going to explain this actually because I feel like this is something I want to keep returning to on this program. It is how our great Persian creators are not compensated for the landmark work they've done. And let me be clear, I said it in the introduction, but I'll say it again. Any Western songwriter, خودتون گفتی الان, who has written over 1/4, even مثلا 1/10 of the massive hits you have, would be receiving giant royalty checks 4 times a year. In other words, you should be a multi-millionaire by now. You know, I have a friend who he wrote one big hit for Celine Dion, one, and that was enough for him to live off for the rest of his life in terms of the royalties he gets. But because every time, and just to explain it to people, every time that song gets played on the radio, every time somebody buys a record of Celine Dion, every time Celine Dion sings the song in concert, every time that song gets played on the radio or appears on a TV show, this guy makes money because he's the composer. So let me ask you, what kind of payment do you get from royalties or publishing? Do you get anything?
Nothing.
Nothing.
From TVs, from radios, from the singers, nothing.
I mean,
even for example, my song, I wrote it for Haide, Shana Hayat.
Yes.
About 60 million hits have it in YouTube. And I don't have 1 penny of that. If you remember 3 years ago, you know Marvin Gaye, the singer,
of course,
he passed away because his father shot him or something like that about 25 years ago. چند وقت پیش دو تا دخترش متوجه میشن که یک آهنگ پدرش رو برداشته یک آقای به نام آهنگ
رابین تیک
این دوتا آهنگ رو یک مقدار از این آهنگ برداشته بودن تو آهنگ خودشون گذاشته بودن. اینا آمدن 7.4 میلیون جاجمنت گرفتن و رفتن حقشون از اینا گرفتن. یعنی در اینجا برای یک نصف یک آهنگ، 1/3 یک آهنگ همچین ارزش قائلم. بدترین قسمت اینجا این استش که من این آهنگایی که ساختم باور کنین که نه که خود ستایی باشه اینا، من وقتی که آهنگ گوش میدم خوشم میاد اینا، اما اینقدر این خواننده رو من یک موقعی دوست داشتم و عشق بهش داشتم که من این آهنگا رو با دل جان براش ساختم، اما امروز از اون آهنگ بدم میاد وقتی صداشو میشنوم. من از کریر خود بیزار دارم میشم.
ببین فرید از این تاریخ شما میدونی من هیچ وقت توی ایران نبودم. من انگلستان با دوی آمدم کانادا. این تاریخ من نمیفهمم. از این اول به من باید توضیح بده، explain بکنین، چون که من this is something I continue to be shocked about, especially as a musician and as someone who I wrote some songs that got played on the radio in the 90s and I still من هنوز یه چکی میگیرم. It's not a lot but it makes a difference.
چند سال پیش
20 سال پیش آره 25 سال پیش of course هر وقتی که هر جایی در دنیا یه کسی اینو بذاره توی رادیو یا اصلا خودشون مثلا if they sing it they have to pay royalty because I wrote the songs. I continue to be shocked about the state of this for Iranian composer. I've spoken with our dear Iraj Janati Atai about this as well. A man whose words that most Iranians can recite.
He's one of the legends.
But who is living in England and he has to worry about money and making ends meet. Let me ask you from the history of this. Why did before Inqilab, why did a Persian music industry where writers and composers are compensated, where copyright is respected, why did that never emerge?
بله دلیلش این هستش که در اون زمان در زمان شاه اینقدر سفر رو اونجا کپی میکردن، کتاب کپی میکردن، ناولار کپی میکردن، اینا رو چیزی که بسیار سالا میلیاردها باید از اینا پول کپی رایت باید پرداخت میکرد ایران. روی نصاب ایران روی کپی رایت اینترنشنال نرفت. کپی رایتی که تمام دنیا ازش تابعیت میکنه ایران نرفت. اما یک کاری کردن که در خود ایران قانون کپی رایت و مؤلفین و مصنفین اونجا درست کردن که اونم به اندازه این بود که ما مثلا یک آهنگ رو به یک شرکت بدیم واگذار کنیم، بعد تو اون شرکت می‌نوشت که مثلا این آهنگ شما رایتش هر جایی که بخواید داری. اما مثلا اینه که یک قانونی برای خودشون درست کردن برای اون کسایی که در داخل ایران کار میکرد. الان که شما فکر کنین هزاران نویسنده ایرانی، موزیسینش، نمیدونم سینما، تئاتر، تمام این کسایی که در بیرون هستن رنج میبرن به خاطر اون اشتباهی که در اون موقع شده.
تو بزرگترین سوالی که تا امروز بی جوابه، نه تو بیداری نه تو خواب نه تو قصه و کتابه.
امروز در ایران خیلی خواننده که مثلا یک صدایی داره و یک 4 گرم پولی داره میاد برای یک آهنگساز و یک ترانه‌سرا که میره آهنگ میخونه میبره تو هر شب برنامه میذاره اینا، اما از آهنگسازش و ترانه‌سراش خبری نیست. که من به اونا پرامیس کردم که اگر این مسئله رو که من دارم میبرم تو دادگاه و اینا، چون همین اگر کرونا نبود ما الان تو دادگاه بودیم، اما چون این ما رو یک ذره عقب انداخت اینا، حالا 2 ماه دیگه 3 ماه دیگه اینا، اما ما کارا رو انجام میده، وکیلا کار انجام میدن. شما فکرشو بکنید که من الان ساعت $450 $500 از سال 2011 من دارم به وکیل پول میدم. به وکیل پول میدم و راستش همکارای منم اونقدر استطاعت این پول ندارن. من از این بر اونور چی میگن قرض میکنم، آهنگای من که میدم اینا چی میکنم که بتونم وکیلو بهش چگونه که تازگی و وکیل آمده میگه که آقا من این پولی که میگیرم باید از 20% هم بعد اونجا.
ولی هنوز من نمیفهمم چطوری why this was I wonder یه چیزی let me propose this and you tell me if there's any truth to this. I wonder if there's something farhangi, something cultural about this. It's almost like in Iranian and Persian culture artists are held to a lesser standard. No one would expect a dentist to do dental work for free. Just do okay. Just do your dental work. I'm not going to pay you anything. Is this
because
cultural?
They value in the songs, the music.
They do, though. They do because we love our artists and we love the songs and we sing the songs and we go, oh, Gugush and Haydn. So, is this part of this long-standing cultural idea that doctors and engineers are to be respected and writers and artists are?
یکی از دوستان من که بسیارم از نظر اقتصادی وضع خوبی داشت، اینا آمد به من گفت که مثلا آلبوم نون و پنیر سبزی اومده بود بیرون. اون موقع مثلا فرض می‌کنم سال 90
ابی اند داریوش
داریوش که این آلبوم من کمپوز کرده بودم ساخته بود اینا، آمد به این گفت فرید این آلبوم چقدر قشنگ و چقدر زیباست و من در حدود 20 تا کپی کردم به دوستام دادم. من نگاهش کردم گفتم تو چرا این کار گفتم تو چرا این کار کردی؟ آره طرف مثلا فرض میکنیم یکی از بزنسمن‌های بسیار موفق و اینا، گفتم تو بزنس تو خوب بلدی اما بزنس دیگران رو نمیدونی. گفت یعنی چی؟ گفتم یعنی این که شما فکر نکردی که شما این 20 تا 25 تا 30 تا کپی که تو کردی این کپی میکنه و کپی میکنه این اندستری از بین میره. گفت من میتونم پس الان پول بدم بهت؟ گفتم نه شما برو بخر، بر من پول نده، شما برو بخر. یعنی اینقدر ناآگاهن. هر چیام که ما میگیم، هر چیام که مصاحبه میکنیم میگیم آقا این آهنگ مال آهنگساز و شعرش مال ترانه‌سراست، این آهنگ مال فلان خواننده که شما اسم میبره نیست، اون خواننده این آهنگه.
نون و پنیر و بادوم یه قصه ناتموم، نون و پنیر و سبزی تو بیش از این.
We know who Paul Anka is. If you live in the West, you might know who Paul Anka is.
I love the guy. Yeah.
Right. So Paul Anka, خیلی هم زرنگ بود. He's a Lebanese Canadian guy, and from the time he was a teenager,
yes,
he said, "I want to own my own publishing." This is back in the 1950s, in 60s. He told me the story at length. This guy, I mean, it's true that he had many hits, but basically, his biggest composition that he's given us in his life, a very rich material life as a consequence of.
Yeah.
It's because of a song called My Way.
Yeah.
He wrote My Way, a song that became identified with Frank Sinatra. It's the biggest Frank Sinatra song ever. But it wasn't written by Frank Sinatra. And everyone understands the guy who wrote the song.
By Sinatra.
Exactly. But and here's the strange part. When we say we don't want to blame the artist, I mean, the strange part is that Ebi and Dariush, I mean, I know you probably don't want to name names because it's systemic. You can't just blame an artist.
No,
but
we after, I'm sorry, وقتی که ما آمدیم در یک مملکت اینجا 40 ساله 41 ساله که در اینجا زندگی میکنیم almost، دیگه ما اینو باید از متوجه شدیم. آقایونی که شما اسم بردین اینا متوجهن که دارن چیکار میکنن اما ترک عادت نمیکنن، اما اینا ارزش برای رایترشان قائل نیستن. حالا ما چی گناهی داشتیم؟ گناهی ما این بود که فکر میکنیم آهنگسازی من بالاتر از پوله. تا این که اصلا CD از بین رفت، کاست از بین رفت، یه چیزی که گیرمون از اونجا می آمد که میتونستیم کار کنیم و زندگیمون رو بگذرونیم، این از بین رفت. فقط موند آنلاین و اینا که آنلاین هم که همه دیگه شما گفتم 60 میلیون آهنگ من گوش میدن اما $1 بر من نمیاد.
Farid, you sound angry. Are you angry?
ببینیم میدونه چرا انگری برای این هستم که من هزار ساعت رو توی استودیو نشستم، در یک جای تاریک مصرف کردم، وقت گذراندم، ضبط کردم. من روزایی شده بود که ضبط میکردم میامدم خونه، خانواده من میگفت که اصلا صورتی تو کبود شده، کبود که نه سبز شده. و با اون عشق و با اون علاقی که من این آهنگا رو ساختم و اینا میامد بیرون مثل به اصطلاح عوام توپ میترکید و خوشحال میشدم و ساتیسفکشن میگرفتم. الان از این آهنگم بدم میاد. این انگری من این میکنه. شما فکر کنید یک کارمنده نشسته ترژر یک آفیسه، صاحب آفیس که این پول در میاره، اینا نه تنها این پولش نمیگیره، اون ترژره از اون بغل که چون دم در هستش و پول و چک و دریافت میکنه اونو ببره هر ماه خونش. یک ماه ببره شما چی کار میکنه؟ ما 50 ساله که گرفتاری اینا هستیم.
مثل باده سرد پاییز غم لعنتی به من زد، حتی باغبون نفهمید که چه آفتی به من زد. رگ و ریشه ها.
Let me be honest with you. I knew of you I knew that there was a guy named Farid Zoland who was very talented and had written some hits. I didn't know, and I knew some of the hits. I didn't know until I started researching for this interview just how many hits you have written, how many songs you have written. And I have to tell you, I've been an artist, I've been a manager in music, I've been a producer, I did a music show for a while, I'm a music fan. I can tell you, I cannot think of any equivalent to you in Western popular music. I mean, notwithstanding Paul McCartney or Stevie Wonder, these legendary artists who've written dozens of hits, but are artists who have mostly written songs for themselves or their groups. The greatest songwriters who write for others in the West, be it Diane Warren or a contemporary songwriter like Ed Sheeran, no one has had the output of you. No one in that I can think of, say, in the United States. So you're not just saying this as a composer who deserves to be recognized. You are saying this as someone that I'm telling folks, if they didn't know, that is extraordinary in terms of the fact that most Iranians could sit in this room with me and sing back 20 of your songs that they've known, off the top of their head. And the fact that you don't get compensated for that is a tremendous injustice.
بس دیگه این مسئله گرفتاری ماها هست. شما اگه فکر کنین که ما میتونستیم مثلا فرض میکنیم به این حقوق خود برسیم، ببینید این همکارای من، این دوستای من، خود من، اینا خیلی کارا میتونستیم بکنیم، خیلی بهتر میتونستیم کار بکنیم، اما بازم با عشق مردم و لذت ما، تنها لذتی که مونده برامون اینه که مردم وقتی که ریسپاند میکنن در جایی که منو میشناسن یا ماها رو میشناسن، اون ریسپاند میکنن برای من بسیار مختنم و بسیار عزیزه که اون از هزاران میلیون دلار هم بیشتره.
In a small way, I hope that we can do that with this program too. To keep creating awareness around this, because I think it is something that it really makes me sad about our culture and something that I really hope we can change. Listen, I know I can't keep you forever. Can I want to ask you some questions about songs, if it's okay, because I am in awe at how prolific, how your output is. It's crazy to me, and it's. I think as a songwriter, it's impossible for you to be someone who just waits for inspiration. You have to have some kind of. You're like a machine. Do you sit down? I mean, really, you're not someone who could just wait to break up with a girl or for the lightning to strike or something to write a song. I mean, wow. You are so industrious. Do you sit down at the piano and just write every day? How was it that you've been able to keep this up?
I was in sleep, and even though I have lyrics from my lyricists like Ardalan Sarfaraz, Shahayar, and Iraj, and others, I have it, and I'm خیلی زود من میتونم حفظ کنم اینا. من شده خواب بودم، تو بین خواب این لیریکس تو نظرم اومده، رفتم پشت پیانو یک تیکه ضبط کردم، رفتم فردا بیدار شدم گوش دادم ببینم این خوب. مثلا شقایق یکیشه. شقایق من تو خواب اینا گفتم شقایق اینجا من این شعر همینجور تکرار میکنم، اینا ملودی رو رفتم پشت پیانو زدم، یک ضبط صوتم دارم، من رو اون ضبط کردم.
And this is long before you knew that you didn't know that Dariush is going to sing that song. This is like you're
exactly. من هیچ وقت آهنگ نساختم که بذارم کنار که بعد یکی بیاد بگه فرید جان آهنگ داری، بگم بله بفرمایید من ندارم. اینجوری نیست. من خوانندم رو باید بشناسم، کاراکترش رو در روی استیج بدونم، کاراکترش رو بشه مردم بدونم، بعد آهنگ براش بسازم.
پس شقایق چی؟ میدونستی که
یه چیز جالب راجع به شقایق بگم بهتون. شقایق من برای ابی نوشته بودم.
Interesting.
داریوش از زندان آمد بیرون، گفت فرید چیز داری، آهنگ چیز به من داری اینا؟ گفتم آره. من اولین آهنگای من برای داریوش شقایق بودی، یاورمش مومن. اولین آهنگایی که به داریوش دادم. بعد گفت که اینا، گفتم شقایق رو من زدم بهش، گفتم اینو ساختم منتها این آهنگ مال ابیه، من یک آهنگی که به یک خواننده میدم دیگه نمیام به خواننده دیگه بدم.
دلم مثل دلت خونه شقایق، چشم دریای بارون شقایق، مثل مردن میمون.
خلاصه این یک مهمونی تشکیل دادم. اون فردا شبش اینا و ابی بود و نشسته بودیم با هم، با داریوش و خانوادگی فامیلی اینا نشسته بودیم. برگشت داریوش گفت که ابی جان من از زندان آمدم بیرون، فرید جان یک آهنگ برای شما ساخته اینا و این آهنگو میخواستم اگر تو اجازه بدی فرید بده به من. بعد ابی گفت که آره داریوش جان، چون داریوش از زندان آمده بود، یک وضعیت خیلی سنسیتیو شده بود همه ما نسبت بهش اینا.
This is be like 1976 مثلا.
بله بلکه زودتر. بله. بعدش هم ایچی این گفت باشه این آهنگ شما بخون. بعدش هم گفت شما یک آهنگ دارین از بابک باید به نام ملای سبزپوش، اونو من بخونم. اینا گفت باشه. اون بود که شقایق و داریوش خوند که دیگه قیامت شد. بعد از اون کی آوره میشه من که دیگه هیچی. کی آوره میشه من یکی از چی میگن مگا هیتای موزیک فارسیه امروز. همه اینو بهش معترف هستن، این داستان. حتی خود داریوش و چند تا مدیایی که صحبت کردن این مسئله رو. حالا مسئله که هستش اینجا اینه که ما در اون موقع الان من اصلا آهنگ میسازم، مثلا فرض میکنیم آهای مردم دنیا گله دارم میگم این داریوش بود بخون، نازنینو باید داریوش بود.
What's so interesting about that is because I was going to ask you, we often speak about great songs as existing outside of the artists that perform them. Like we say, oh, that's a timeless melody, or that's a music I can't get out of my head.
Yeah.
Do you think is a great song sometimes about who is performing it? In other words, do you write a song and think, oh, this would be great for Gugush, but it won't be a great song if Dariush sings it?
Songwriter, I think, should have a lot of ability to know the singers. For example, مثلا آهنگ شانهایت من برای هایده نوشتم، یا یاره رو برای هایده نوشتم، مثلا یا پادشاهی خوبان برای هایده نوشتم.
But my question is, would that be as great a song if Haida had not sung it? Would My Way be as famous a song if Sinatra hadn't sung it? That's the question.
من فکر میکنم این دید من اینه گفتن برام. مثلا خدا مغفرتشون کنه آقای فرنگ فرهی گفت و من هر آهنگ تو رو میشنوم میبینم چقدر ست ساختی به صدای اون خواننده. این خیلی مهمه. شما فکر کنید آهنگ شانهایت اگر ابی بخونه یا داریوش بخونه یا گوگوش بخونه اصلا اون نمیشه. اگر آهنگی که مثلا شقایق و هایده بخونه هیچی نمیشه. ممکنه مردم خوششون بیاد با صدای زیبا و پرصلابتی که داشت، خدا مغفرتش کنه. این باید از آهنگساز و ترانه‌سرا باید از فکر بکنن که این کار رو به کی میدن. این لباسی که دوخته میشه به تن این خواننده و به مردم ارائه میشه باید از فکر باشه.
هر کس به تمنای کسی غرق نیازه، هر کس به سوی قبله خود رو به نمازه، هر کس به زبان دل خود زمزمه سازه، با عشق در آمیخته در راز و نیازه.
There's a story when it comes to the lyrics that you put with your music, choosing the right lyrics and the way you write music with them. There's a story, I think, if I have this right, you were young, you were sitting at the piano, you were composing music in front of a poem, and your father was overhearing this, and he said, what are you doing? And you say, well, I'm writing a song. And he says, no, you're fighting with the song. What was he getting at?
No, it was my sitting at the piano. I'm changing the chords, and I'm doing this and that, and I'm seeing the lyrics, and I'm looking at the lyrics again, starting. I saw my father is standing in the back of me, or they said, "What are you doing here?" من گفتم پدر جان دارم یک آهنگ می‌نویسم. گفت نه تو آهنگ نمی‌نویسی، تو داری با این شعر کشتی داری میگیری. گفت
یعنی چی؟ What did he mean?
یعنی تو با زور می‌خوای بسازی، با زور آهنگسازی نمیشه کرد. تو باید شعر رو کار کنی و شعر رو طوری باید کار کنی که خودت اگه شاعر بودی اون شعر رو میگفتی. من بعد از این حرف پدرم هر شعری که دستم گرفتم، هر ترانه‌ای که دستم گرفتم میگفتم تو اگر ترانه سرا بودی اینو میگفتی. بعد این با اون احساس خودم وقتی که میآوردم به وجود خودم من کار میکردم اون در میامد که میخواد، چون این کار خیلی خیلی شکننده هستش. باید از خیلی آدم مواظب باشه، کلمات باید چجوری ادا بشه، صحبت عاشقانه چجوریه، جنگش چجوریه، نمیدونم ناراحتیش چجوریه، اینا رو همه رو باید از بغل شنونده باید بشونی. با چی؟ با هارمونی درست و با تقسیمات درست، سر و ته داشته باشه باید آهنگ. پدرم میگفت آقا جان شما یک روز از من سوال کرد که تو آهنگساز خوبی هستی؟ گفتم والا مردم تعریف میکنن بابا جان، بعد میگن آهنگت خوبه اینا. گفت ببین اگر یک روز فکر کردی که تو آهنگساز بسیار خوبی هستی و کار تمام، بدون کار تمومه. You are nothing.
Wow. Yani you can't be happy with all that you've done. You have to keep doing it, huh?
Yes. I wanted. من تا اون چیزی که پدرم بهم گفتن که آقا بدون که هیچ وقت تو به یک دریایی داری سفر میکنی که به خشکی نمیرسی. باید از پارو بزنی که تا به اونجا برسی.
شبا همش به میخونه میرم من، سراغ می و پیمونه میرم من، تو این میخونه ها خسته دردم، به دنبال دل خودم میگردم، تو این میخونه ها خسته دردم، به دنبال دل خودم میگردم، دلم
You were born in Afghanistan. And your dad was a very accomplished musician there and singer there.
Yes.
How does it happen that this kid who grows up in Afghanistan becomes at the center of the Iranian music industry by the 1970s? How did it happen?
About 4 or 5 friends together, we starting to have an orchestra, amateur orchestra in Afghanistan radio. And the youth program, we had a 1-hour program and recording.
And you were playing piano?
I'm playing piano, and I'm playing some kind of percussion and that any other thing. 5 تا بورس آمد، 4 تا از شوروی بود، 1 دونه از ایران بود. بعد ما 5 نفر رو کاندید این کار کرده بودن که بریم مثلا در شوروی و در ایران که 1 دونه بود اونجا تحصیل موسیقی بکنیم، چون این مراوده های فرهنگی بود که بین افغانستان و ایران و مثلا حالا شوروی و اینا بین خودشان بود. اینا بورس آمده بود در رادیوی افغانستان و رادیو افغانستان ما 5 نفر کاندید کرده بود که مثلا این بورس ها رو بگیریم و بریم. من گفتم برو اول. ما گفتم خب رفتم اینا دست کردم، اومد دیدم ایران اومد بر من ایران اومد، این کره کشی کردیم ایران اومد. اون 4 نفر رفتن شوروی، من اومدم ایران وزارت فرهنگونه رو. بعد رفتم
خودت فقط رفتی؟ you went alone?
بله، سوار هواپیما شدیم اومدیم اونجا و
بچه بودی؟ you were a teenager still, right?
بچه بوده، بله بچه بوده، من 10 سالم بود. بعد آمدیم وزارت فرهنگونه رو، اونجا بسیار چی کردن و این بورسیه بودیم دیگه، بار ما رفتیم هنرستان عالی موسیقی و درس خواندم اینا. ما was 15 years old که من اولین آهنگم ساختم.
آخه خیلی I was doing the math actually. I was trying to figure out because I was thinking Farid's not that old and he was these hits are from 50 years ago. How is he doing? How did you had to be 50?
I was درست من الان 47 ساله که کار میکنم. 47 سال و 15 سال چقدر میشه؟ 62 سال.
Yeah.
من 62 سالم الان.
So you're, and by the way, when you go as a 15-year-old, as a 10-year-old, I mean, I know you're a proud Afghan and you've kept your Dari accent. Was there any xenophobia? Aziyat میکردن in Iran in the 1970s at all because you were Afghan?
اصلا نه. اتفاقا من در اونجا خانواده اینجا باید زیاد بکنم. خانواده شعبال شهپره و شهرام شهپره به من خیلی نزدیک بودن، مثل یک برادر برای من بودن. انوشیروان روحانی خیلی به من کمک کرد چون از دوستای صمیمی پدر من بود و چون پدر من در محیط هنری ایران بسیار شناخته شده بود و دوستش داشتن و احترام برش می‌ذاشتن، نسبت به من خیلی لطف داشتن. اینه من در ایران هیچ گونه احساس غربت نکردم و این صحبتایی که الان راجع به افغان و افغانی و از این داستانای پریجودیستی که در ایران الان هست متاسفانه نبودن.
Tell me about what convinced you to leave Iran in such haste in those volatile months.
It's unbelievable. وقتی که خمینی تو هواپیمای ایر فرانس وارد ایران میشد، خبرنگار تو هواپیما ازش پرسید که چه احساسی داری که میخوای بری ایران بعد از این همه سال؟ گفت هیچی. اینه که گفت ما چند نفر دوستان نشسته بودیم، گفتم بچه‌ها من رفتم. گفت یعنی چی؟ گفتم که میرم از این مملکت، من دارم میرم. گفت چی؟ گفتم وقتی که این احساس نداره من عاقبتشو خوب نمیبینم. آمدم خلاصه اینو پیش خودم تو فکرم بود که از ایران بیام بیرون. پدرم بازم زیاد داوت داشتم مقداری. پدرم صحبت میکرد.
پدرت هنوز افغانستان بود؟
افغانستان بود. افغانستان به من تا رفتم تو مخابرات میدون چی میگن سپه و اونجا رفتم زنگ زدم و اینا که خیالشون از من راحت باشه. پدرم گفت که سرود مرود نمیسازی. گفتم چرا با پدرشون چرا؟ گفت حرفا خیلی عجیب و غریبه. گفتم چی عجیب و غریبه؟ گفت وقتی که میگن نفت و مجانی میکنیم و آب و مجانی میکنیم و برق و مجانی میکنیم و خونه براتون میدیم اینا، این یه دروغای توش هست. تو در این مسئله مشارکت نکن. من تنها آهنگسازم که در انقلاب هیچ گونه آهنگ من به اونجا ننوشتم. آمدم آهنگ چی کسی میخواهد من تو ما نشویم خانهش ویران باد، ما اون ساختم که ستار خوند.
چه کسی میخواهد من و تو ما نشویم، چه کسی میخواهد من و تو ما نشویم.
من برای 6 ماه لندن بودم. 6 ماه لندن بودم، بعد آمدم تورنتو، یک ماه و نیم 2 ماه تورنتو بودم.
دوست نداشتی تورنتو؟
تورنتو اون موقع اینقدر خلوت بود و این یانگ استریت یه کوچه بود.
It's true. ایرانی‌ها هنوز نبودن اینجا ولی it's true.
فقط یه چلو کبابی بود اونجا و یک هندی، رستوران هندی بود. بعدش هم که من 3 آگوست 1979 وارد لس آنجلس شدم.
You know, it's funny thinking about you in LA now because LA certainly through the 80s, 90s and I guess today it's considered one of these meccas of Persian music. But I guess when you first arrived there, was there even a Persian music scene there?
هیچی نبود. چند نفر از همکارا بودیم و اینا و یک کابار تهران بود و همین ما تازه شروع کردیم. یعنی باور کن خودم می نشستم جلد کاست می ساختم. اون موقع کاست بود، فقط خودم جلد کاست می ساختم، بعد می دادم چاپخونه که چاپ کنه. اصلا اون موقع گرافیک اینا چیز نبود. بعد یواش یواش دیگه این شرکت ها اومدن و با هم چیشیدیم اینا و شروع کردیم کار کردن.
And were you always committed to making Persian music? In other words, I'm curious why, because you're so good at what you do, you could have worked with English artists, right? You could have, I mean, I could see you working with someone like Quincy Jones. چرا نمی‌کنی؟ میتونی اصلا هر وقت که میتونی.
خب فکر می‌کنم الانشون فکر می‌کنم میگم اون آدمایی هستن که اینقدر بیزی هستن و اینقدر وضع کارشون درست است که یک آدم که این همه گرفتاری و این همه چی داره رو ممکنه به بازی نگیرن اینا. منتها دوست دارم که مثلا یک سری کارمو مثلا بهشون معرفی بکنم، گوش بکنم، ممکن است که به دردشون بخوره، ممکن است استفاده بکنم. ولی اما راستشو بگین نه دنبالش رفتم، نه اینکه چیزی بوده که منو معرفی بکنن که آقا این آقا هست شما این کارو بکن.
You said that you do not consider yourself an Iranian songwriter or an Afghan songwriter or a Tajik songwriter.
I'm a Persian songwriter.
I mean Persian songwriter. What does it mean? Tell us what that means to you.
اینه که من وقتی آهنگم میشنوم که در افغانستان استقبال میکنن، وقتی در تاجیکستان استقبال میکنن، به یک زبان صحبت میکنن، این دیوای بودن این جامعه فارسی زبان من دوست ندارم. حالا یک روز با هم یک خط کشیدن اون وسط، این دوست ندارم. اما دوست دارم که فارسی زبان با هم اتفاق داشته باشن، با هم لذت ببرن، با هم خیلی کارا میتونن بکنن. حالا اون ایران، اون افغانستان، خون تراتوریشان همیشه قابل احترامه. اما مسئله که هست اینجا اینه که ما این حالت پریجودیسی رو نباید داشته باشیم. من وقتی که کامنت های پریجودیسی بر من چی از افغان، چی از تاجیک، چی از ایرانی بر من میرسه بسیار ناراحت میشم. اصلا میگم چرا این مغز باید اینجوری فکر کنه؟ رگ و ریشه ماها در یک سرزمین آریایی به هم وصله و کوشش کنیم که اون چیزی که درسته برای مردم بهشون تقدیم کنیم و ایشون بدیم. چون ما جز این مردم و این جوانا و این ما کسی نداریم، چیزی نداریم.
Farid Zoland, I so appreciate your time, your historical perspective, your passion, your fighting for the artists' rights, your advice, your elegance. Merci که اینقدر وقت داشتی واسه ما امروز. It was an honor, and I so look forward to talking to you more in the future. Thank you for this.
Jian Aziz, thank you very much. I appreciate your time and بسیار مصاحبه خوبی داشتم و خیلی دوست دارم که هر وقتم گوش بدم یاد امروز باشم و که اون چیزایی که تو دلم بود شما از من بیرون آوردین و این خیلی خوبه یک ژورنالیست اینجور کار بکنه.
Thank you so much.
تشکر میکنم. خیلی ممنونم.
خداحافظ.
قربانت عزیز. خداحافظ.
That is the legendary composer and songwriter Farid Zoland. He has been responsible for scores of hit songs by Iranian superstars over the last 5 decades. Farid Zoland joined us from Los Angeles, California today. This is Full Time for Roqe for today. Remember, for all things Roqe, go to our website, roqemedia.com, roqemedia.com, where you can become a patron, you can subscribe, you can link to all of our platforms, our special episodes, our Roqe funnies, our videos, roqemedia.com. Hey, thanks to the amazing team who put this show together. The fabulous Keon, thoughtful Nagin, Ponta the artist, producer Susan, Super Patty Saw, Sabi Roham, sponsorship Sean, Ageh Mehrdad, Captain Reza, and Groovy Shaya. And thank you to all of you out there for supporting us and sharing our content throughout Season 1. Please subscribe if you've not done so already on any of our platforms. It's free. And we'll see you for the debut of Season 2 coming on Monday. Find me on Instagram and Facebook at Jian Ghomeshi. In the meantime, Mizun Bashi.